It's tragedy. Families have tragedies. Things happen, and there was a domino effect of tragedies in my life, and that's really sad.
What do you describe the domino effect of what?
It's probably something that we should save for next time.
Lori Daybell, infamously dubbed the Doomsday Mom, has captivated and horrified the public with her tumultuous journey through the legal system. Her recent interviews paint a portrait of a woman who's adept at reshaping her image to fit the evolving narrative of her life. In her conversation with Keith Morrison, Lori exudes defiance and an unwavering belief in her prophetic visions. We'll fast forward to her sit down with Briana Whitney of True Crime Arizona, and we witness a stark transformation. I think a little insight into what we're going to see in this trial. Because today, she's a humble, introspective Lori, positioning herself as a beacon of hope and a guidance to her fellow inmates. What on earth is going on? Hey, welcome to Profiling Evil, and thanks so much for subscribing and hitting the like button, giving us a thumbs up, and please share us with your friends. This is really an interesting case, and we're going to take a look at the contrasting interviews and unravel some of the threads of Lori's calculated attempts to control her story and influence public perception. We'll walk through her statements piece by piece and ask the question, is this a genuine transformation or just the next move in a master class on manipulation? Daybell's media engagements serve as a master's class in narrative manipulation. Her ability to pivot between personas is not just a testimony to her adaptability, but it's a carefully crafted attempt to garner sympathy and influence both the court and those of us in the public. So let's start with the Keith Morrison interview, which was all about defiance and prophetic certainty. Now, if you think back in that March 2025 interview with Keith Morrison on Dateline, Lori emerged as a combative, almost smug individual. She remained resolute in her denial, using spiritual claims to explain away the horror of what she's been accused of, saying things like, "I've seen things in the future that was shown to me when I was in heaven." And she also said, we, speaking of her and Chad, were not in jail in this new vision that I'm having. We were not in prison. So she believes, at least then in the Morrison interview, that she and Chad were not in prison any longer and were living out their life as it was intended. Now, if you watched that interview, you likely walked away thinking that that's not her voice of humility speaking. It was a voice of a self-proclaimed prophetess, clinging to her divine narrative. At times, she smirked and she interrupted or redirected Morrison's efforts to hold her accountable. On several occasions, she spoke with this kind of cold tone that matched her stiff body language and her unwavering gaze. She refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing, and she rebuffed the idea that Chad Daybell was convicted based on credible evidence. Her strategy was denial and distance. She emphasized what she believed would happen instead of addressing what has already happened. Now, fast forward a couple of months to the Briana Whitney interview, where she was suddenly humble and this new advocate for inmate suffering in her Arizona jail. Her newest interview was filled with kind of emotional pivots and self-effacing commentary. Gone is the spiritual superior prophetess of the Dateline interview. Now comes Lori Daybell, the inmate missionary, the legal underdog, and perhaps most manipulatively, the advocate for other inmates in the Arizona correctional system. In other words, she's now a jailhouse minister. She began those interviews by laying the groundwork early on when she said, quote, "There are intelligent, strong, beautiful women here that have been here for 8 years because of family tragedies. It's the same, like my case, a family tragedy, not a crime," close quote. You know, this is perhaps one of the most chilling yet recalculated framings of Lori's opinion of what happened in her crimes. And she presents it in this interview by calling the murders of her children and her lover's wife a family tragedy. She attempts to draw a moral equivalency between personal suffering and criminal culpability. She doesn't include any discussion about her then-husband Charles Vallow, who happened to be gunned down in his home moments before she headed out to Burger King. And of course, that's the focus of this trial now. But she takes this thing even further when she says, quote, "Arizona has no intention of giving anybody a speedy trial, even though it's your constitutional federal right. So what am I fighting for? I'm fighting for these women. I'm fighting for all of these women and trying to set a precedent here that you can't just leave these women in jail for years," close quote. Well, I guess she forgot her pretrial argument last week where she was complaining that she hadn't had enough time to find witnesses while complaining that she wanted her speedy trial. And as the judge so beautifully said, you can't have it both ways. Well, now she's the protector of the downtrodden women in the jail. This very well could be her way of building a jailhouse bank account, in my opinion. A way to avoid some of that inmate to inmate physical violence that sometimes occurs in a correctional facility. At face value, it sounds kind of noble, but make no mistake, Lori is positioning herself as a civil rights warrior now. Her language is filled with activism, adjacent phrases like set a precedent, constitutional right, fighting for these women. This is a rhetorical sleight of hand, redirecting our attention away from her charges and toward systematic flaws. Now she reinforces this persona with imagery she's painting, such as complaining about dental and health care in the prison. And she paints a bleak picture of all jail conditions, again, not for herself, but for this community that she now claims to serve. And then, perhaps in the most revealing comparison she makes, she says that the courtroom defense is comparative to her profession as a hairstylist. Now, this analogy might seem bizarre, but it's actually quite telling about what's going on. Lori is asserting that she is the best person out there to deliver her defense, not because she's legally trained, but because nobody else can represent her brand better than her. In short, she's not a defendant. She's a businesswoman defending her product, and her product is Lori being bad. And she backed up that by reiterating her 5-year preparation, saying, quote, "I have been working on my case for 5 years, so I know my case better than any attorney out there, and that could learn it over a 2-year period of time." Now, her statement is revealing on 2 fronts to me. First, it downplays the need for legal expertise, and second, it reinforces this martyr narrative where she utters things such as, "I've done this alone, I've suffered, but now I serve." Well, when the state's witnesses start spilling the beans on why they think Lori Vallow Daybell is guilty of conspiring to kill her husband, Charles Vallow, she says she's going to confront the people who stood up and lied about her. That's according to her statement, where she told Briana Whitney, "I want to be able to go and talk to the people that have stood up and lied about me. I get to face them." I think that's important. Let's listen to that a little. This is more than legal posturing. It is strategic vengeance. It's emotional theater. Lori knows she won't likely walk out of court a free woman. Frankly, she never will because she's on life. But she can reclaim the story. You You see, by portraying herself as falsely accused and spiritually appointed to lift others, she makes herself the main character again in this courtroom drama. So think back to that Keith Morrison interview. Lori's tone was clipped, dismissive and detached. But with Whitney, she softens. And I hope you caught what I found either theatric or frightening. When she was asked some questions, Daybell would stare off into space, or maybe a spiritual realm, as though she was receiving divine revelation. Her cadence would slow. Her facial expressions softened. It was during one of these revelatory moments that she said, quote, "I'm a people pleaser by nature. I've kind of been, it's just really difficult for me. Well, I want to change this a little bit and suggest that it appeared to me, at least, that she's a people manipulator. This fragile, feminine, and empathetic voice isn't the same person from the Dateline interview. No, this is carefully a rebranded Lori Daybell." Then, during that spiritual exchange, Daybell said one of the creepiest things that I've heard in the interview when she said, quote, "I'm not a fighter. I've been a peacemaker my whole life. I'm a person that loves everybody. I don't like to fight," close quote.
I don't think there's so many wrongs in the
So
system.
this, in speaking of the trial, is a challenge for me. She went on to say that speaking about the trial was a challenge, but she has to fight for herself. This is a statement so deeply ironic that it reverberates with this incredibly painful echo, because this is a woman who orchestrated a series of deaths that included the brutal murder of her own children, Tylee Ryan and J.J. Vallow, and the death of Tammy, her lover's wife. A woman who concealed the children's remains and then danced on Hawaiian beaches in a bikini while the nation searched for her kids. And did you happen to catch that part of the interview where Daybell was stopped from talking about her children's death by her attorneys? While this woman may not have listened to them and decided she was going to represent herself in court, she sure followed their counsel about the murders she was convicted of. So to hear her claim she doesn't like to fight and that she's always been a peacemaker is not only misleading, it's grotesque in my opinion. Her actions led to the deaths of those she once called family, her own daughter, her son, her lover's wife, and possibly her husband. I mean, how does such atrocities reconcile with her claim of being a peacemaker? And again, now she's faced with charges of killing her husband, Charles Vallow. And then she'll be facing more charges around Brandon Bedreau. And of course, I don't know what'll ever happen with something like Alex Cox, or more importantly, Joseph Ryan. And therein lies the power of manipulation. Lori Vallow Daybell isn't just rewriting her narrative, she's attempting to overwrite the facts, which leaves us wondering, is Lori going to testify? She says she's keeping her options open. And in my opinion, the hedging is strategic. If things go poorly for her, she can take the stand in a Hail Mary attempt to save things. If things go well, she avoids cross-examination. But her awareness of the legal nuances shows here, because it sounds to me like she thinks she's only going to have to answer questions that she has predetermined. She said, quote, "I would have to write the questions. They can't ask me anything that I don't write," close quote. Well, that ain't so. But now that we're back in the prison, it's important to note that she says that she continues to exercise, and she thinks that she's physically and emotionally up to the task of representing herself in court. And if you caught what she said, she now considers herself a female inmate, fitness coach, and counselor. She told Briana Whitney that she's a mentor, so to speak, inside the jail, stating, "I teach a workout to the girls every day. We laugh together, we cry together, we pray together. Sometimes God needs somebody to go into the trenches, and I think He put me there for that purpose." Listen to this. You can see Lori Vallow Daybell casting herself as the Jailhouse missionary. She's not just surviving prison, she's thriving in it. And now she's proselytizing to other inmates, uplifting or destroying their spirits. I mean, what could possibly go wrong with this picture? Now, I think Lori Daybell's new endgame is part of this rebranding that we're seeing. She's trying to soften her public image and humanize herself before an Arizona jury, starting with the public and hoping to put it in front of the people that'll decide her life, hoping that she might preserve her identity as someone with this divine purpose, even though she's behind bars. So here's my question for you. Is this strategy going to work? I hope you'll put your answer down below, because personally, I think it's hard to say at this point, but make no mistake about it. Her humility, her advocacy, and her claims of injustice are not casual. They are strategic. Whether this is a genuine spiritual transformation or a deeply rehearsed manipulation, the outcome of this trial will tell us if the jury bought it. And perhaps the most revealing of all of Lori's own explanation for why she gave this interview and why she remains steadfast in her new role is this. She said, "I love everybody. I'm here for a purpose. I think you know, God put me here in this jail, the worst jail in the country. And I really can't argue it. But he brought me here to help uplift and strengthen these women. And that's what I'm trying to do every day." You got to hear it in her words. Whitney, and she was asked the most important question of all when Briana said, "Did you kill your children?" Lori didn't cry. Lori didn't flinch. Lori didn't deny it. Instead, she leaned in with a slight smile and said, "That's a story for another day." Well, it wasn't just a deflection. It was calculated. It was haunting. And it was vintage Lori Daybell. To the average person, that phrase sounds dismissive, like she's brushing off the murder of her 2 children as if it was a bedtime tale that she's saving for later. But if you've followed Lori Daybell's descent into religious delusion, manipulation, and violence, you know that there's more behind the surface. That moment wasn't spontaneous. It was likely the result of a legal strategy, narcissistic control, and the twisted logic of a woman who still believes she's the hero of her own story. So let's talk strategy first. Lori already knows a murder conviction sits in her books in Idaho. She knows the Arizona charges relating to the conspiracy to kill her first husband, Charles Vallow, are still looming. I suspect her attorney coached her before the interview to not admit to anything. He said probably something to the effect, "Don't play into their hands." And for once, Lori followed the rules. If she had admitted to killing JJ and Tylee directly or indirectly, her response could have been used by prosecutors in the Charles Vallow case. So she didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. Instead, she said the one thing that keeps her options open and her audience curious. She said, "That's a story for another day." Well, that line wasn't just about protecting herself legally. It was also about power. Lori Daybell has always tried to control the narrative. Whether it was the way she portrayed herself as this loving mother while her kids were missing, or the way in which she basked in the attention of the apocalyptic followers who actually believed she was a goddess, someone chosen to usher in the second coming. Lori Vallow has always needed to be the center of the story. And by saying that's a story for another day, she reclaims the spotlight. She casts herself not as a monster, but as a mysterious protagonist, someone who knows the truth but isn't quite ready to reveal it. It's a performance to her. And like all performers, she wants an audience anxiously waiting for the next act. In her mind, the story isn't over. She might be sitting in jail, shackled by conviction and physical chains, but in Lori's world, she's still the storyteller. That phrase will dangle hope to anyone foolish enough to believe in her. a hope that one day she'll open up and reveal the real story. And perhaps that's the most disturbing layer of all, that Lori might truly believe there's a right time to reveal what happened. In the apocalyptic framework where she and Chad Daybell lived, timing was everything. Visions, portals, zombies, dark spirits, they all played on a divine clock. In her world, it isn't revealed in courtrooms or interviews, it's delivered by revelation. To her, this might genuinely be a story that's meant for another day. Not because she's hiding guilt, but because she still sees herself as somebody who's chosen, somebody who's misunderstood, someone who will one day be vindicated. She may have followed her lawyer's advice, but make no mistake about this, Lori Daybell meant every word. She doesn't see herself as guilty. She sees herself as the main character in a drama that's still unfolding. And as long as she keeps talking in riddles, as long as she believes she's holding the final word, then she's in charge. But the truth doesn't need to wait another day. It's already here. And there you have it, folks. Lori isn't just reshaping the story of her past. She's sanctifying her present. According to her, everything she did, the choices, the deaths, the courtroom drama, all of it was orchestrated by design and by divine design. She's not only serving time, she's fulfilling prophecy. To her, prison isn't punishment, it's now her mission field. So thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the psychological transformation and the courtroom strategy of Lori Daybell, according to me. Now, this isn't just a story of a mother accused of murder. It's the story of identity, manipulation, and narrative warfare. And if you found this analysis compelling, make sure to subscribe to Profiling Evil, where we turn insight into understanding, and we try to shine a light on the darkest corners of human behavior. Make sure you're watching for us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you like audio podcasts, check out Profiling Evil Podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. Now go over to profilingevil.com and visit our webpage. And while you're there, consider picking up my book, Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult. If you want to know more about cult mentality and recruiting tactics and the way in which cults seem to get away with being evil, then check out that book. I think you'll find it to be very informative, and it will really help you understand what's going on in the Daybell case. Hey, thanks so much for your support of Profiling Evil. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.